All right, everyone. So we have Daniel Sala on again, and we are going to touch on some very interesting topics, five broad ones: the Bucegi Mountains, the human trafficking, all of this misinformation, hidden truths. I mean, tons of stuff, ancient builder races. Daniel, if you want to take it away, I know you've been doing a lot of research.
Sounds good. Yeah, I feel it's only right that we should do this since we started it 4 years or so ago.
Yeah.
And it all began with me trying to figure out the identity of the author, which opened up a can of worms. So then you could say I went, fishing. I discovered the theory that Radu Chinamar is this guy, Tan Bozaro, back 4 years ago. But I discarded it because I figured that someone like Radu Chinamar was not going to risk being in the public eye, which this person is. His background is in music, and he was born in 61, which actually matches the books perfectly. In book 4, it says that he was a little older than Cesar, who is from 1970, but he's still not too old to take all those, strenuous trips inside the earth and so on. His looks and demeanor were also a perfect fit, kind of shorter and calm disposition and focused. And yes, he seems to have dedicated his life to music, but also to Tantra and yoga and more esoteric practices. He chose the name Indra as a musician. And when I visited his site, just the style alone and the themes were a perfect match. It was like reading Radu Chinamar. I'm just going to give a quote. He was supposed to give a concert at the Sphinx in Bucegi, and he wrote as Indra, "For the concert at the Sphinx, I will probably choose some tunes with a strong masculine, transcendent touch, but also with archaic resonances that send our imagination, feelings, and emotions in bygone times when our ancestors manifested a high spirituality and a profound knowledge of the cosmic laws and mysteries that surround us." So, that at that point, I was convinced there was no way that a musician would write like that. So, turns out he even wrote the foreword to the translated first Peter Moon Montag book. And so far, it was all, gumdrops and lollipops, nothing strange, until I discovered that he is also a core member of an organization called MISA, which focuses on yoga and New Age spiritual practices and teachings. But it would be more fair to characterize it as a cult. So I started by watching my research by watching a documentary on them where all the instructors or the yogis were extolling the virtues of this guy, Gregorian Bibolaro, and yeah, putting him on a pedestal and ascribing supernatural gifts to him. Except I must say that Tambozaro was more neutral, though he was also reverential towards him. This guy, Gregorian Bibolaro, might be the most ill-reputed person since Ceausescu in Romanian history, but more on that later. So when I dug deeper into this Misa cult, I discovered that even though they like to pay lip service to shedding your ego, like all these, New Age groups do, they actually were quite proud and quite self-centered and wouldn't really have it any other way with their own, and would even yell at the adepts oftentimes. And they also adopted a pyramidal hierarchy with lots of initiations and their oaths of secrecy, and also they held the outside groups in contempt. This is based on untold amount of testimonies, not just one. But because I wanted to maintain neutrality, I, up to this point, still gave full benefit of the doubt to Radu. So it turns out that this rabbit hole goes much deeper. So this group would hold a lot of, let's say, devious practices like orgies inside these tantra houses, and they were basically bamboozling the girls, which oftentimes were minors, that they were burning karma and they would rapidly evolve if they took part in these the sexual acts, which were usually directed towards Bivolaro, but also his immediate underlings, including Dambozaro. It said that he was, quote unquote, sent girls from time to time, as if there was no introduction necessary. So they also employed hypnosis in this, and when the girls complained that they contracted STDs, they would get prescribed just natural cures or IUDs or something like that. So it doesn't end there. They also had a penchant to, well, drink urine, and not just their own urine, but each other's, and especially Gregorian Bibalaro's urine was the most prized. Gregorian was also what you would call an energy harvester. He would hold these sexual, beauty pageants or, gatherings where there would be naked women on stage. And there was one video of these where there is also a 10-year-old on stage. So there are countless accusations in the hundreds, including by minors. And it doesn't end with the prostitution. They actually are guilty of human trafficking because inside these tent houses, which they extended throughout Europe and even Japan, under different names usually, for example, Nata Yoga Center in the Scandinavian countries, Resonance in Czech Republic, and currently they took the moniker Atman Federation. Because of how besmirched the Misa name was, they had to resort to these measures. So they also sometimes had the girls vomit with salt water as an attempt to purify themselves. But anyway, so the human trafficking thing, it would also be based on the girls, which would be made to prostitute themselves, to dance, to video chat, to create porn, anything that would earn Misa funds, because all this income was either donated entirely or the vast majority to Misa. There's even many accounts of children leaving their homes, and especially of intellectual families, such as one in 96, who apparently was 3 years into Dan Bozaru's, aka Radu Cinamar's classes, and left home at 21, and her parents gave her an ultimatum to either leave home or go with them, with Misa, after they noticed that she started drinking her own urine and had replaced the religious icons in her house with pictures of Gregorian Bivolaro. There is also this book, one of the many books that Dambozaro translated, called The Secrets of Transfigurative Ecstatic Lovemaking in Tantra Yoga, which was a de facto manual for sex workers, which they would get quizzed on, which would encourage them to take part in bisexual, group sex. So in case you think that this is hearsay alone, Gregorian Bivolaro, as well as higher-ups from Misa, have been, convicted, not just charged, with multiple crimes. They more often than not got away by extraditing and getting asylum in other countries, but at least on 2 occasions, he and others had to serve time. Also, the vice president of Misa was sentenced for perversion, sexual activities. And they also were guilty of large-scale tax evasion and money laundering. And in a 2004 trial, even Dan Bozaro is listed as part of organized criminal groups and unpaid labor and distributing porn. So now I'll jump to one of Dan Bozaro's earlier works, in which he again eulogizes Gregorian Bivolaro in the preface. It's one of those that puts it beyond doubt that he's Radu Cinamar, because the theme is from 2000, so 3 years prior to taking on the mantle, pun intended. And it's about the hollow earth theory. So before I start, I want to make the parenthesis that despite what I said, Dan Bozaro did have an excellent reputation as a yogi, and pretty much no one said anything bad about them in that sense, other than his pain. But he is very rigorous when it comes to the practice. So in this book, he details how for 7 weeks he experimented with a tapas, which is like an effort to raise your consciousness and basically deprive yourself of external stimuli. So he stood in darkness for several weeks with the help of some friends who just gave him the bare minimum to survive, like milk, and described experiencing some interesting phenomena like flashing lights, and sometimes he would get a rapture rest feeling in a subtle way, but sometimes it was more abrupt. Like on this occasion, when he felt something akin to a bolt of lightning going through his crown chakra, and he noticed a great light manifestation coming from the ceiling, which,
Like a portal opening or something like that?
yeah, sure, it was just an entity coming through. And he could see it whether he closed his eyes or not. In fact, when he closed his eyes, he was even clearer. So with his eyes open, it was blurrier. And despite the light being so radiant, the rest of the objects in the house were actually not visible at the time. So this entity was hovering, and he couldn't really zoom in on particular details because it was so luminous, but he could make out that he was very tall being and very powerful and somber, and that imposed a great deal of reverence. In fact, there were even voices singing his praises in the silence. And he was ornamented with a lot of jewels, both in his clothing and on his body. So he eventually spoke, of course, telepathically to the Dambozaro. And it turns out that he knew this instinctively, didn't even have to say, but that it was Indra. He had actually chosen that name because of his personal affinity, but this part of I give full credence because of how it's describing the detail. So I just wanted to preface that because that might lead some people to believe that this was basically the inspiration for Makandi, but the two are not mutually exclusive. Anyway, next I will go back to Misa because it goes even deeper. So there was a recent, you could call it disinformation campaign to paint these books, including inadvertently I contributed to paint these books as truthful, but it intensified last year with some major truther proponents. In one of these videos, a guy was interviewed by the name of Mugurel Marvin Atudorei, who claimed rightfully that he knew Radu Cinamar. The only rub is that this guy that was considered an authority on the facility there is actually not just an instructor of yoga within Misa, but also a representative and basically a spokesperson, has many appearances on their television program and so on. So I bring it up to give exposition to this. There's a campaign manager of President Basescu back about 15 years ago that started a political party called Cosmin Gusha. This party was called PIN, P-I-N, and it consisted of a lot of Misa members, including the aforementioned Atudorei, which shows that it's not just a spiritual organization, but has much higher aims, which are to infiltrate politically and to destabilize in a societal way. And from talking to people in the know, I've found out that there's basically two camps in Romanian politics, which are these proponents of Misa and the Freemasons. Currently, it's run by the Romanian politics is run by Freemasons essentially. And another ominous sign about this is the fact that the official site for Bucegi, the official site icon, is none other than the pyramid with the eye inside the Masonic sign, altering eye.
Yeah, that's in all the stuff they have. Yeah. All saying I, they call it.
So finally, about Misa, Cosmin Gusha, who is not just anybody, you know, in addition to being the campaign manager, is also a geopolitician, a physicist, and analyst. He claimed back when Bibalaro was last arrested in 2023 that actually Misa was coordinated from the beginning as by the Securitate to spin their web of influence and recruit people within the Soros network. It was like a nursery.
Said Soros, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And funnel people, their preferred people into power, which included a lot of judges and lawyers. That's how they got away with so many trials. He even claims that his arrest was, Bivolaro's arrest was orchestrated by Soros because Bivolaro and Misa had become a liability. So now I will return to Don Bozaro.
Okay.
In the large gap between books 4 and 5, between 2009 and 2017, he wasn't just preoccupied with, let's say, his Department Zero duties. What accounted for that large gap actually was the fact that he had undertaken another ufological project altogether called Galactus. It's now completely scrubbed and just archived. That's how I found out about it, and reposted by some fans, I guess. But it consists of information that was given in the astro or ether, so 4 and 5D, like Radoi describes them, inside a Syrian mothership on which he and another person were invited on in 2014. He claims vehemently that it is not channeling, and that is what sets him apart from the other New Agers. So he went around and hosted a lot of conferences, like nationwide, based on simply this, let's say not channeling, but, you know, etheric bilocation, which completely butts heads with the idea that he was this high up, well-to-do person in Department Zero with essentially the greatest technology known to man at his fingertips. And the plot holes don't end there, because he also edited, narrated, composed the music of, starred in a series of documentaries called also Galactus that are in total 12 hours long, and that employed a lot of the local ufologists of the day, including MISA members. So in this series, which is actually not too bad, but there are a lot of giveaways, he makes predictions that are completely wild, such as that Galactus will, in the near future, like 2014 or so, will become like the greatest hub on the internet for information. And he also called the good guys the Galactic Federation of Light, which even Elena Danan and these mainstream speakers will tell you that it's a complete trap and, you know, predatory aliens masquerading as good guys. So
It's a front. Yeah, it's a front. Yeah.
So in addition, the whole series doesn't do him any credit, doesn't really add to the books because of how very vague and lacking practicality and just barren and weird they are. So now I'm going to give the evidence that puts it beyond shadow of a doubt. I mean, clinches it without, you know, question. It comes courtesy of the book editor, the Romanian one from Tarcha Publishing House, which was also the guy who forwarded the Lama Skull back in the events of the second book. So he did enable this whole series, but in our correspondence, he covered for his friend, because they go back, way back in Misa, both of them, and went back and forth with me, but always denied that Dan Bozaro interrupted Chinamar, and at the end kind of told me that I should back off because I'm threatening the continuity of the series. Until I used his own quote against him from 2005 from a source that chooses to remain private. But this is what he said in 2005, that the author, meaning Radu Shamar, is a music creator. He composes electronic music. He has 13 albums and still goes on. His music has reached many countries from Europe, where it has climbed on the first places in the charts. And this email contained a forwarded email from the address Dani@Indra Music, and I'm not going to complete it because I don't want to dox him, but you get it. This is the proof positive. So, cut to last year, because this whole, de facto investigation started 2.5 years ago, and about a year and a half ago, after being frustrated by the way it's stalling, I remembered that Gregorian Pipolaru, while he was taking asylum in Sweden, he changed his name to Magnus Aurosson. And he even had a Facebook account at one point, which he left a message in the Radu Cinema group back before he got banned. Incidentally, I became the admin of that group subsequently. But I happened on his old and overlooked comment where he blurted out that Radu Cinema equals Dan Bozaru, Misa. No one really gave him any mind, and in fact, as I said, he got banned for misbehaving shortly after. But just the fact that he was active on Facebook, and it was definitely him, just based on his, CD Facebook wall.
They can't help it. I just feel like, criminals love to brag. He just couldn't. It's an impulse.
Exactly.
He wanted to throw that breadcrumb. Anyway, yeah.
So, knowing that he would almost certainly be dismissive of this amateur investigator, I used my ex-girlfriend, who I made aware of all this, her Facebook account. She was game, and she let me essentially write everything. And I pretended to be just a girl in search of answers, which by luck also happened to be from a town that Misa happened to be very familiar with. So his first response was, "It is very good that you, using your intuition, have turned to someone fortunately competent." So he completely beat the bait. No doubt because of, the attractiveness of the girl in question.
The ego, yeah, they don't sit and question and think like, maybe this could be a trap. Maybe, why would she be after me all of a sudden? I mean, whatever. Anyway, male ego.
Yeah. So the first question was, I basically asked him about all these contradictions regarding Galactus and Dambozaro. And he told me that all the books, the 7-book series, was essentially based on esoteric information such as myths and legends about the Dacians and Hollow Earth theory, coupled with channeling information, because, as he described, Dan Bozaru had been proficient in channeling as early as 92 or 93. And when I asked, but how come the books were so compelling and had such a ring of truth, he said that this happens in literature. Look at Balzac. What takes place is that a literary creation takes a life of its own in the same vein as a Tibetan tulpa, as described in the second book. So he was staunch in this position, which did tell me that he's not really involved in the book like it's sometimes suspected. And neither is he the inspiration for Cesar. So when I asked about Galactus, he told me that it started fine, but then they got corrupted by evil entities, and he put an end to it, ordering Dan Bozaru to stop it, which he fortunately did. But because it had befouled Misa's reputation, he had to punish him by putting him under house arrest in a former student dorm in a certain district of Bucharest that I'm not going to name right now. So the follow-up question to that, of course, was, if he was sequestered inside this apartment between the years 2014 and 2016, then what accounts for all those vivid, detailed journeys inside the Earth? He said that it's all in the astral. That Radu never set foot inside the Earth. However, he claimed that the extraterrestrial base, which is how he referred to it, is very real. And proof of that is the fact that when you take a spade and you dig in that area vicinity, you will get stopped by the authorities. And if you are nosy and try to ask questions in certain key places when you're getting close, to their entrances, then they will call military forces on you without hesitation. And he said that the stakes are very high in this whole drama, and that they are using whoever's in control of the Bucegi facility, the computers there, to extract technology and instigate something like a World War III, or at least scenarios for it. He also said that the Dacians are a form of Iranians, and that the drones they are setting off are just a warning for now. And when I pressed him on the base, and I told him that I had spoken to a couple of real insiders, he told me that now you see that Putin's war is nothing but an effort for the Russians to penetrate the Carpathian base, and Ukraine is just a dam. And that it was a mistake for the Romanians to accept the US militaries, but now it's too late. So he told me all this, and at the end, when I tried to put him in contact with someone else, he said that no, that would be risky because, as you know, which I didn't know, I'm imprisoned in France, and I'm using a Moroccan jailmate's cell phone illegally. So I cannot do that risky, Now I'm going to tie it back to another personality that features heavily in this whole drama, which is Valentina. She is the blind psychic that is essentially incapable of telling a lie because she lost her sight at 8, and everything that she says is based on experience, on life experience. But this lack of, let's say, worldliness also makes her a bit of a target. And she was invited by Gregorian Pipolaro to speak in multiple Misa conferences, which about 12 hours worth is recorded on YouTube. And in a couple of these, people asked her, how does she view Pipolaro? Because, like I said, he was worshipped inside Misa. And this is the maybe surprising part, is that she said that he was stainless and almost shining, except for the lower chakra, which is the root chakra, also are responsible for sex and other lower needs, which she said that was flickering and was a little behind the others. I mean, noticeably. But all his other ones were so bright that they were on the verge of bursting, which shows that he's not the absolute scum of the earth either. So even in his conversations with me, he was very generous. So this shows that the truth is very nuanced. But yeah, she did catch him in some occasions when his heart chakra would burst after telling some jokes, which betrayed that he was prideful. And she knew about Misa's bad reputation, but she said that you have to think for yourself. And when you're within there, the groups are capable of wonderful colors and manifestations, energetic manifestations. But she did mention that many of their higher adepts had a lot of darkness and that they really need to work on that. Except one of these higher-ups, which Dan Bozaro was, actually, the second thing Guevara told me was that Dan Bozaro is his old disciple. They nicknamed him Dani. So Valentina said that Dambozaro, this was her only mention of him, that he is handsome in thought and writing. So even he, despite all I said before, is not, an intrinsically bad person. And even the books, I've come to the conclusion that they are very sophisticated psyop, but with great deal of truth, as much as 80%, but as low as less than half. I can't put it any lower because of the amount of volume and detail. So the series is excellent at explaining the what, but it's not good. In fact, it's the opposite of good at understanding the why. It's promoting this faith, this blind faith in white hats, and pitting the heroes, the Department Zeros, against the Freemasonry, and also propelling Cesar Drad as this exalted sage who was the first to breach the energetic barrier, whereas one of the insiders that I mentioned, which I will dedicate a compilation in the near future to, was actually the first person to breach that energy shield on a second attempt as part of an American military effort. So the books are what you would call a limited hangout. But even Cesar might very well be real, because back in 2007, this guy called Terry Carter, who is this explorer and treasure hunter, claimed that the books are nonfiction and they recommended people read them. He said that back in 2007, he was called by someone in Romania that had a very heavy accent and that introduced himself as Cesar, who told him that inside the famous projection hall, he saw in those holograms that there is a central point of 7 caverns inside the Uinta Mountains, which this guy, Terry Carter, posed the mineral rights to, allegedly. And that there were many deaths involved in protecting the secret of the Bucegi base, which has to do with the fact that it explains that we are divinely created and not made by, a tyrannical alien overlord that comes periodically to exert its, oppression on Earth. So from best I could gather, there are multiple nexus points like this one, like Bucegi, over the Earth, but the one in Bucegi is the central one. And there is definitely another one in Antarctica, and but definitely another one in North Korea, which was described in the testimony of Jack Flynn, who was an ex-Marine and took part in the Korea conflict of 2003, meant to take down the base, but failed and fell into the wrong hands. And now it is also used to keep humanity in certain time loops. So another of the insiders that I mentioned is whistleblower who was discredited back about 2-3 years ago. He went under the name U.S. Navy whistleblower, and he claimed that he was stationed in multiple places in the Eastern Bloc and in Bucegi Mountains. And he said that that one in particular, and the Romanian arm of the special military force, is extremely powerful, even more than some superpowers like Germany. So now I will give some evidence-based corroboration of that.
This is awesome. I've been listening to Terry Carter for a long time. I think he's great. And yeah, man, please continue. You're on a flow, man. This is beautiful.
Cool. So this was actually courtesy of a Romanian TV show that helped me a lot in coming forward right now, because it shed a lot of light and it even revealed the identity of Radu. However, he presented zero evidence. He just said that Dambozaro is Radu Cinaua due to their similar styles, but that's not enough to go by. So, but he did have ample information about the earliest documented efforts to breach the facility in Bucegi, which started as early as 1913. in Sinaia, which is a pretty famous locality in the vicinity. They wanted to build a tunnel as an auto route and even designed blueprints, a tunnel inside the chain of mountains in which the space is. So this was stalled by World War One, but apparently Hitler and his regime came back with a bang and demanded with urgency that this, because might I add that the whole Transylvania, including Bucegi, was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire as late as 1918. And we have a lot of pockets of Germans here. So Hitler demanded that they build the same route, but under the pretense of delivering petrol to the Nazis in 1937. It's well known that they had a subdivision that was tasked with finding esoteric secrets and treasures and entrances to realms, which was called Aneneabe. And apparently the real motivation for this tunnel was to enter Shambhala. So they finished this tunnel, and in one of its bifurcations, they came upon a black wall that was apparently glossy, alive, and impenetrable. Their efforts to breach it were futile because it just resulted in flashes of light. And this report says that there's over 100 deaths in that expedition alone. So this effort was stalled by the other war, World War II, breaking out. So how do we know that this tunnel is real? There's a CIA document that was scrubbed in 2016, but not before being screenshotted by this person who gave this interview. And it detailed how this tunnel was finalized by 1951. Only some viaducts and some light installations were missing. Jump to 1968, Elena Ceausescu, which is actually the brains behind that tunneling, she had a high interest in parapsychology and psychic children, and had unlimited access to secret documents from the SRI. And she discovered the existence of this tunnel and sent some prisoners to investigate and try to get inside. When she heard about the strange phenomena that accompanied their attempts, she did a 180 and ordered that it be shut down. There were, I don't know if all of them died, but there were many deaths involved. Now, if you try to enter this tunnel through the first entrance, it is blocked and privatized and turned into like a mushroom deposit and a cheese factory or something.
Some hidden in plain sight kind of crap.
Yes, and of course, privatized so no one is allowed in.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what they always do. Make it look like an outdoor, coal mine or something. They always hidden in plain sight.
Exactly. And the other end was dynamited, bulldozed, and even the Yalomitsar River was diverted just to hide it. This was in 85. So she was at it for a long time until she gave up. This investigator, an amateur like me, also took pictures of all these things. So now for an example of the advanced reverse engineered technology that the US Navy whistleblower was representing. Back in 1968, Russia invaded Czechoslovakia, and shortly after, Ceausescu gave a speech saying that, first of all, he lent help to the Czechoslovakians and said that he would greet the Russians with bullets, not with flowers, and was overall in opposition. So the Russians allegedly sent 3 tanks through the then USSR border into Romania, and these, well, they got vaporized as soon as they passed the border. They just got melted is the best description, or disintegrated. So they actually had a larger platoon, but they retreated after this happened. And even the Americans had apparently sent troops inside the Sinai tunnel previous to the books events, and they never got out. And another example is in 2010, it's actually easily documentable that there were 2 Israeli helicopters sent over Romania, apparently in an act of diplomacy, but actually they had a LiDAR which scanned the interior of the mountain. So they were actually there for reconnaissance. And I don't know if this is a reason, but this is what the investigator claims, that the reason why these also got melted, disintegrated, just like the tanks, is because just having the LiDAR system, which is a type of radar, was considered an offense by the AI that governs the Bucegi facility. Because even having like a knife on you is enough to never be able to pass the barrier, because you have to have like a
Altruistic.
Yes.
It can measure that.
pure intent and high frequency level of vibration. So apparently this guy that I mentioned that came up with this new intel was offered at one point 250,000 euros to give up his research hush money, and offered to take a blood oath, but he refused. I cast doubt over his account because he's another one that considers himself the chosen one and the only one that is able to pass the barrier, so he doesn't even know that it already has been breached many times. But that's fine. So at the end of the show, a viewer wrote in saying that he was an army guard in 92 in front of this tunnel, and that he's noticed many people going inside with cables and lights, and from different nationalities, including the US and Israel, and that only 30% came out.
Huh.
So staying close to that time frame, back in 93, around the Bucegi area, which is the closest municipality to Bucegi, there were countless reports of people experiencing insomnia, but without the need to sleep. So they were automatically well rested, and they even experienced high states of joy or even euphoria. Between the years 1993 and 96, there were tremors or little earthquakes at specific times, twice a day, 8 p.m. and 3 a.m. in that area, which is delineated by a triangle. Despite of this, there is no seismic activity at all, just underground booming. In addition to that, you have a lot of unexplainable electrostatic phenomena, like sparks coming out of people's hands in that area, and even being shocked or even burned when they touch various things. And the radio reception was also unexplainably strong at the time, which suggests that there was an energy amplification similar to the Montauk project. And also sightings of halos around people and large holograms in the sky and eerie sounds. So before we move on to the more esoteric aspect, there is also a university professor of physics, well respected, called Konstantin Bursuk, who in his later years, after retiring, wrote about a vast network of galleries under the Carpathian Mountains, apparently between 4 and 5 kilometers in depth. He described one entrance under the Chahlo Mountains, which Radu writes as being one of the last outposts of the Hyperboreans. And not coincidentally, Mr. Bursuk says that these, as best I can tell, these tunnels were left by Hyperboreans. However, he claims to have entered them physically, not through bilocation, and was even accompanied by a fellow university professor, also a technical director, who he named, and that the tunnels are generally sloped They are 10 meters in height and 15 in width. They're also arched. That it was covered in lights, I mean, the arch, which looked phosphorus. And the strangest part was that,
Five acids.
exactly, yeah. I mean, more diffuse, not a single light fixture like we had.
Yeah, yeah.
So the way he moved was, or the way he traversed the tunnels was the most curious part, which is apparently morning jumps. This is because he only weighed a sixth, and it felt very freeing and great levity. So the way he got in to those is through two go-betweens that are humans, but that have constant communication with aliens, but that you have to be invited there. So he describes also. Sorry?
I said just like Edidorpa in Kentucky. Yeah, yeah. It's like
Exactly.
yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah,
I
yeah.
consider that book to be the Hollow Earth Bible, having
It is.
toppled.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you
Yep.
for showing me all that, Mr. Mythos. But anyway, yeah, shout out to Mr. Mythos. Anyway, continue, please.
Mhm. No, I'm glad you mentioned that. So Mr. Borsuk describes a spiritual center in addition to the tunnels, and that they are planning, the reason why they involved him is to help in the construction of signaling station, or they're planning an airport of sorts, but for ET craft. And he lists a few mountains that have connection to this, which are pretty well known from the Radoshanara books. Retezat, Bucegi, Codianu, Suceava, Satu Mare, which goes to show that it's all around the country. And at one point, he entered a large hall that had luminescent basalt walls or marble, and an interior sun that was actually fixed on a wall. So not the interior sun, but just artificial. That's about the extent of his information. I would like to reach out to him, but I'm sure that he's passed on because he would be 90 plus today. But just to further reinforce that he is a credible person, he has released patents on over unity and faster than light devices. And when he went public with a plasma motor that uses auto convergence, he wrote to Romanian authorities and wanting to execute it. They more or less ignored him until he was courted by French military, and after they granted him a French visa, that's when the Romanians swooped in, and it all went underground since then. So now that was the down-to-earth, more or less irrefutable, which I include Valentina in that, scientific side of the proof. Now we will move to the more highfalutin, esoteric side. So there's a writer that claims, Melchior Ra, that claims that, similar to what Valentina was saying, the Great Pyramid in Egypt and the Sphinx of Bucegi are connected through what she describes as a energetic cross of the planet that receives planetary energy and transmits it back, and the ending points of it are like I said, the two aforementioned ones. This is the vertical axis, and the horizontal axis is between Sardinia and the Anatolian plateau in Turkey. And she said that in those cases, it is also signified, concretized by pyramids, but those are upside down pyramids, whereas the first two are the right way up, but also they are actually like a bipyramid. So symmetrical, they also have an equally sized pyramid going down.
Like a diamond.
Exactly. She says that the famous Cheops pyramid is like that, and that it's full of rooms underneath as well. But the other end is actually not in Bucegi, but in Retezat, also in the same mountain chain or close. And I found this in other books, so I know it's real.
I think the pyramids on Mars are like that as well, or on other planets.
Yes, apparently most of them are built like that. And this is because they have more transmitting, more amplifying ability. So another Romanian esoteric writer claims that we don't just have Hyperborean outposts, we also have Atlantean, and it gives great support to the Chinama writings, especially book 4, when he focuses in on one that is comparable, if not even greater than Bucegi, the one in Orăștie Mountains near San Misegetuza, which he claims houses even more advanced technology than the one in Giza. And that what we see today at the surface in San Misegetuza is but a small fragment, which was actually confirmed by the, underground scans.
Stuff that they'll admit on the news. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not mediatized. It's, swept under the rug. But this author, Remedra, claims that the Giza ensemble is nearly 30,000 years old, with some exceptions, like not all buildings are that old, but that this one near San Misegetuza is more recent, about 14,000, but it was actually, mountains were moved just to cover it. The landscape was reshaped just to protect it from invaders as well as from the locals, and that's because we just don't have the mental and emotional stability and would become addicted to such technology. I mean, we're already addicted by our rudimentary phones and whatnot.
Tracking devices. Yeah.
Yeah. Moving on to other overlooked occult articles and books from Romania, which in this case was magazine from 95, before even Valentina came out with her information. It says that Sumerians landed in the Carpatho-Danube-Pontic area, which is basically Dacia of old, and that other ET civilizations that were led by Jehovah and Samyaza landed later, and that the Sumerians, the civilizations that would flourish, would develop into the Sumerians, which were ETs to begin with, before they interbred. So this group was led by Remus, which is another mythical figure. Turns out he is real, and actually, if you reverse Remus, it's Sumer. It was slightly bigger than Romania today, and this article also mentions ET systems that are meant to connect to universal vibration and knowledge, no doubt hinting to the Bucegi site. And it also
Is
drops.
it he, or does Ramos sound similar to Remus and Romulus with the origination of Rome?
That's it.
I don't know. Anyway,
Those are the ones they are referencing. They are meant to be the founders of Rome,
Remus, Romulus,
Yes,
Remus.
who suckled at the teats of that wolf.
Yeah, under the dog. Yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway,
So this article ends with the provocative information that Sphinx and Babele, which is another edifice nearby, are 26,000 years old. They were mentally constructed, and they have a crystal inside that acts as a computer to allow you entry inside these EP systems. And that proof of these ancient underground tunnels is the fact that in the Republic of Moldova, they have 100 kilometers worth of tunnels that are used as wine storage, which are extremely sophisticated and very clean and out of place architecturally. So that was a very neat confirmation of what Mr. Borsuk was saying. And as further confirmation of the Sumerian thing, it's a scientific fact that we have carvings of winged serpents as far back as 10,000 years ago here. That it's a theory that is gaining more and more traction, that Proto-Sumerians started here, and the migrations, happened after to places like Greece and Middle East. And parenthetically, the 8-pointed star that Valentina saw in the forehead of all Romanians is also the Star of Ishtar, which also has close ties to Sumerians, and incidentally the Anunnaki, which is not that good. But the most irrefutable proof that Romania is cradle of all these languages, or a lot of them, are certain plaques that are dubbed the plaques from Sinai. And they were found in the mid 19th century. There were gold there. There were hundreds. And they were melted and used to finance the famous and admittedly beautiful Palace Castle, but not before being cast into lead at a local nail factory. So at least they had the integrity to do that. Now that's all that remains, but even those are scattered far and wide and not even allowed to be viewed anymore in museums and private collections. But luckily, there do exist many pictures of them. And it is beyond any reasonable doubt that they are real, because no 19th century forger could craft such scripts that are so varied, because they contain Cyrillic, Proto-Cyrillic, Greek, and Latin alphabets. They describe events that are very accurate for the time. They're a natural language, so full of, slight variations of dialect that you would expect. And most of all, no forger, in addition to not having any motivation to fake these, would have access to all these inscriptions from all these civilizations at the time in order to create a convincing hoax. Of course, this was also swept under the rug and discredited. Okay, now moving on to a very interesting book based on channeling, which of course, brings it down a notch, but because of how compelling it is, I had to include it. It says that it is channeled by various races from the Galactic Confederation, and they refer to this solar system as Fidelia, and to the star as Ra, and they assert that there are 12 planets in the solar system, and that in addition to the artificial satellite called the Moon, we also have 15 geostationary satellites that are artificial, much smaller, and that are cloaked. And the 15 is the most significant and is called Gentorem, and is geostationary, means it's fixed to a coordinate on Earth. In this case, the complex in Bucegi. So their purpose is to spread the universal vibrations and keep civilizations stable and maintain, well-being. The point of view of the following information is inner Earth Sumerians, who call themselves apparently Kamor, who say that they pass on the baton to us, to the people they bred with, and the last time they were on the surface with us was 14,000 years ago. But that some teams of them remained underground, including in these formation tunnels. They were 2.5 meters tall, but besides that, they pretty much look like us. And they describe a number of Sumerian cities in this area, underground, and unifying system for universal communication, which is their name for whichever side. The Sumerian city under Raro mountain is called Palmyra, and I mention it because they claim that Raro is currently the most high vibrational place on the earth. So this city, Palmyra, the entrance towards it is physical, but by the time you get in, it's a city of light. Different time continuum, different octave. Then they go on to describe some hangars underground, and that they welcome the Galactic Confederation members. And the city under Bucegi is called Zalador. This is not substantiated, but I thought I would mention it. They describe that the whole range of mountains around Bucegi contain giant transmitters, basically encased in rock, that are vertical, 1,000 meters or 1 kilometer in height, and 70 meters in width. and that the one on Karayman Massive acts as the amplifier, and that you can sync to them mentally if you apply the liquid crystal that is your brain in the right way. But that the transmitters are not activated or not entirely at the moment, because if they were, they would cover an area of 630 kilometers, a radius, but they would, in the current climate, level many cities, because the cities are the most low vibrational settlements. So that's why they have to work at raising the level, which is actually the main thrust of this book, apparently. They also mention halls and archives and labs underground that are connected by tunnels, some of which will go vertically. And this was, I like this part, that apparently Dacians were allowed in, especially as refuge in times of need, and oftentimes didn't even know that they were passing through interdimensional gates, which sometimes was a help to them. And they say that there is no past really, because many of them have returned, and many of them will remember that they were one of them. So it seems that there are three civilizations working in tandem, and at the same time, three missions that are headquartered here and other places, but that they impact Fidelia, aka the solar system. Even though you would think it's just a small planet, it's not gonna. But it says that how you will know that you will enter the age of Aquarius is, or the next stage is, that Jupiter will slowly be turned into a star, and two new satellites will be brought around the Earth in addition to the Moon. So I wanted to add this regarding the inner Earth thing, that Ascension Glossary claims that many surface souls may rejoin inner Earth timelines, especially from 2000 onwards. So if you have a connection to one of these civilizations, then you have a very good chance of breaking through. And the reason why they haven't done it sooner is because most inner Earth civilizations view us as hybrids of refugees peoples that are too prone to violence. But we also have to give them understanding, because they too are in the process of ascension. And apparently some of them have been admonished by guardians or high ascended beings for spreading misinformation about their civilizations, which there is no shortage of misinformation about the inner Earth. So apparently it's their doing as a form of protection, oftentimes. So the last book that I will mention is another one that precedes even Valentina, so mid-90s. It's called The Galactic Ancestors Talk About the Spiritual Mission of Romania, which it's an off-putting title, but there's some nuggets in there, which is these two, the last two books are channeling based. It says that the date of the global awakening will be 2035, and it will coincide with the worldwide contact with our star ancestors. And that what we have to do in the meantime is correct our degenerated genetic template, which was due to hybridization and corruption of the divine plan, but that even the lesser so-called lineages can make the leap if they, make a sustained effort. And that this information comes from an intergalactic council spirit that was incarnated here 13,000 years ago, that has worked in the stations underground. And he says that the person who will pass the barrier at Bucegi will be a child of the astral realm, and that he will be of pure breed or lineage, and that he will find a great library. I later found out that the best claim of that is of Teles, who I will dedicate compilation to in the near future. So the last tidbit is that the Sphinx hides secrets tied to Sirius. So my best evaluation right now regarding the history and the peoples and the real forefathers and architects of the base, they are the people called the Hebrew-Aryans, which were seated here by the Syrian Council, just like this book said. But this comes from the Ascension Glossary again. And that their goal, their purpose is to help in the planetary grid repair and to heal the fractured consciousness of the Nephilim that resulted from the Nephilim wars and all the traumas and miasmas, as it's put, and to give way to future civilizations that promote the law of one. So this source also claims that they descend from the Hyperboreans, which was an older root race, and they are the ones that bestowed the Hebrew-Aryans the diamond sun frequency, which is the D12, and they are supposed to protect the stargates and to bring balance. So this brings me to maybe the biggest point of contention, the biggest, steering of the narrative that the Raduchinamar books have done, which is to portray the Anunnaki as our benevolent makers. This goes back to his documentary series, which was all about, worshiping basically the Syrians, but he doesn't distinguish between, or not more than a paragraph throwaway, between the Syrians and the Anunnaki. But of course, the difference is like night and day. So the Anunnaki, or I should call them the Anu Elohim, initially started as part of the greater Elohai Elohim family, and they had made it up to 11 strands of DNA. But through inbreeding, they have convoluted their consciousness and distorted their genetics and mutated their templates. So they went to the Elohai Elohim, which were guarding the D12 gate, demanding for their archenemies, the Draconians, to be destroyed. The Draconians are D10. And because the Elohai Elohim refused, they destroyed the D12 gate, and this is called the original sin. And this set the stage for all the other mishaps. They, of course, because they have the proclivity to play the blame game, they said that it's the High Council's fault. But anyway, after destroying the D12 gate, they were forced to rebuild their entire creational hologram into one that is finite and unnatural and based on inverted mathematics. So they like to play masters of the universe and have little to no regard for free will. And they are in the process of trying to merge our matrix, which is still partly at least organic, with their fallen one. And they are the ones that wipe the first two seedings of humans. Unlike the D10 Draconians who act more by force, they act through seduction and manipulation, just like exemplified in the books. They like to pit the good guy ascended master versus the bad guy reptile. But in fact, they are just as much fitting the sacrifice, lose your soul energy, if not more. And they are also the main, pushers of the dark sex culture and their dark arts of rape.
Blood rituals and sex magic and all that Aleister Crowley and occult.
Exactly. As well as the culture of worship is their signature, and the Olympus and the Egyptian and the Roman pantheon are either Anunnaki or part of their extended family. They also seek planetary grid control through, scalar technology and scrambled languages and induced amnesia. I covered in a previous video that they installed the frequency fence around the Earth. And not just that, but they blocked humanity's strands 9 through 12 and polarized the other 8, shutting half of them off, leaving us with the 4 base genetic code. They also orchestrated the Great Deluge, and they Afterwards, they materialized all the records and the ruins from Atlantis and so on. But they are not to be confused with what I have identified as the true founders based on the following facts. So, Ancient Glossary says that the true founders of the Carpathian Base, which has been co-opted, are the Lyran Syrian founder race, and they are, benevolent, and they act under, scribal system and respect the law of one. And this is maybe the only way to integrate, to validate what Cesar was saying in book 3 about the architects of the base being from another galaxy. Because in certain esoteric lore, the Lyra constellation is actually in Andromeda, and they later colonized Sirius A and so on. And even Cesar, I don't believe it was disinformation when he said that their mission was to help humanity. And if you want to know what created humans, humanity as a whole, it's the Lyrans and being from the galactic center, and they did it as essentially as an experiment. And by the way, if you want to know what all the ET races are, they are simply evolutionary programs that we ourselves as souls have signed up to and designed in a mission to experience all the available spectra of vibration, and using 3 types of spirits, which are the angelic, the fallen angelic, and most of all, which no one talks about, are the elementals, which actually are just undergoing their natural process of evolution. So all of them are part of the divine, actually, and there's nothing wrong with there being darkness and lightness, in one place. The mistake comes with believing that the duality is on equal footing, because good is incomparably greater than evil. Evil is just meant to refine and expedite, the good. Okay, so in conclusion, nexus points or major builder race sites like the one at Bucegi were left here with great intentions, and no coincidence that the technology is organic and crystal and sound and light based. And it hosts an archive and frequency stabilizers, and last and not least, portals to higher realms, which you could call ascension. Unfortunately, it has been corrupted by the negative alien agendas and the black ops that work alongside. But while they can influence, they cannot fully control. There are areas that they simply cannot have access to. And that's because it would get in the way of planetary liberation that the Guardians left these outposts for. So that was about the extent of it. And yeah, I'm planning at least 2 more videos, including firsthand accounts of people that have been in the Bucegi Mountain. It goes back to what the Greek was saying in our second interview or something about the future becoming the past, it being like an Ouroboros.
Time loops, yes.
Yeah, but like a whole huge scale, like us becoming the progenitors, the people who made the base. And it basically comes down to forgiving the perps and the people who have, misappropriated these things. Of course, they're going to use their wily ways and, try to trap you into their whatever false narratives and polar matrices. But the ones that are still redeemable, you have to forgive. And it's only by doing that that you will, get to the next level. That's how it works, and leave the others in the dust. So I think that the reason why I'm obsessed with this topic is because it turns out that it's crucial to like ascension and us.
You don't have to justify it. I'm there with you.
Our continuity but can you believe it? Like, it stems back to just a unassuming summary of some books, and now it's really
That's sometimes how it's laid out. No one's gonna really. You figured out a lot of stuff. You're able to compile a lot of things. How do I say this? It's like no one else is going to do it for you, and sometimes the answer is just that simple. I say that simple, but
Yeah, it's actually, you're right. In one of those channeled books, I have a lot of pearls of wisdom, and it said that the true communication is image, is never, it says that the mouth is a sexual organ, and that it's about simplification, but in better put, it would be like a synthesis. So collating all the, main points.
that was wonderful. Yeah, I sincerely appreciate that, Daniel. I'm looking forward to the rest of this series coming out. Regardless, it's so nice to have you back on. And I mean, this is just so fascinating. I sincerely appreciate the research. I know all the viewers do too. And this is just wonderful information, from a 100,000 foot view. And I don't know too many other people that really try and mainstream this for the younger generation to digest. So again, honored to have you, and thank you so much.
Of course, man, it's a pleasure.